Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. I don't think troops in Europe impact the president's decision-making process, or does the impact his goal of the acquisition of Greenland at all. Now, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said as the administration presses forward on a foreign policy agenda that has rattled allies, strained NATO, and collided with overwhelming public opposition at home. Now, from Greenland and Venezuela to Iran and the growing fog of Russian disinformation, questions of sovereignty, legitimacy are converging into a single geopolitical stress test. And now to discuss it all further and what may be next, we're joined by Colin Woodard, director of the Nationhood Lab at Salve Regina University. Thanks for coming in today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with this statement. This comes at the back of as some of these European allies are sending troops. I mean, the number is quite limited. But we already have this statement here. Will this kind of presence in your mind of any kind of EU troops in Greenland change the president's mind?
I think it's a good idea from a European perspective. The president's policies are detrimental to the United States' interest. It makes absolutely no sense. You have a threat to Europe from the east, and now Europeans are having to deploy military forces to deter attack or incursion by the United States. That's, the sober explanation would be rather insane. So one does not want that to happen. It's incredibly unpopular within the United States. Trump is a bully personality, and bullies tend to want to punch down, not punch up, and tend to be cowards when it comes to somebody who will fight back. So having troops and making it not possible to just land a few paratroopers and take over the territory is probably a constructive thing, and it will likely dissuade him from doing something like that. It creates a tripwire and a cost. So unfortunately, we live in a world where that was probably a good idea and may be constructive.
But at the same time, it's hard to read President Donald Trump, but at the same time, how much of this is still a kind of his way of doing a deal? How realistic could it be that America would send military assets into a NATO ally's territory? Is this just blustering? Is this a message? Where are we headed with all this?
Yeah, I think prior to this deployment of European assets, I think you couldn't discount the possibility he would do that. If he thinks he can do it, who's going to stop him? And it's not a rational decision from a foreign policy point of view. It's all something Trump wants to do personally because he's president. My understanding from listening to him is that he feels that when he looks at the map of North America, that it doesn't look right. You have Alaska up in one corner separated by Canada and Greenland, and you should clean up the map by making it all one country. It's that level of, not strategic thinking. So, I don't think it's in the interest of the U.S. And, it's polling at 4% approve of the idea of using military force to take Greenland. And 4%, that's about the bottom floor in any polling question. They call it in the polling community the lizard man number because 4% of Americans will apparently say that lizard men are trying to take over the world. It's at that level of floor. So incredibly unpopular, even though the president himself is pushing it. Almost his entire base is not supporting that. So.
Yeah. But on that, you mentioned this poll, this similar one. I think it might be this in the Ipsos Reuters poll. That's pretty much 89% of Democrats, 6% of Republicans opposing any military force in Greenland. Right. Now, when you have those kind of numbers, when obviously much of the population is against this, even probably a lot of his base, you have Congress as well. Venezuela was maybe slightly different, but is he able, in your mind, really to circumvent Congress in all this? That's why I'm wondering, how real is the power that he has? What's the reality? Is there a middle line here?
He shouldn't be able to do it. In our system, Congress is supposed to, approve whether we take military action and declarations of war and the like. In this case, the severity of the crisis in American democracy is such that Congress is not fulfilling its constitutional responsibilities, even to defend the powers of Congress itself. Like the president is wiping out federal agencies and eliminating spending that can only be allocated by Congress. But the Republicans controlling Congress are fine with their own powers disappearing. So if the entities that are supposed to intervene to step in when something crazy and destructive to the American interest happens, when they're not doing it, there's not really a solution within our system. So it's part of the depth of the crisis and the instability within the United States now that yeah, he probably could do that in Greenland, and probably nobody would stop him in advance, even though it would be, a disaster for the United States in the middle term and for the world almost immediately.
And one of the main concerns as well is what this does ultimately to the future of NATO. I mean, we talk about a lot of Article 5, this common defense mechanism. We never talk about what that means if internal allies are actually fighting each other. Right? Not anticipated. Now, the Danes are apparently now citing this European mutual assistance with the treaties of the European Union, 42.7, without going too much into that. How much, if anything, does that stop President Trump? He doesn't think too much of international law to begin with, but would this in any way impact his decision making? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, if it's a easy acquisition, if you can go after somebody who can't fight back, and like in Venezuela, the operation is pretty certain that he can do what he wants and kidnap the Maduro, the head of state of that country. If he's actually encountering resistance, you actually have Swedish and Danish and French troops and assets and aircraft. Yeah, that's another thing entirely. So I think the deterrent effect of that is a good idea and successful, because unfortunately we live in a world where you need to defer the ambitions of somebody who's not thinking clearly.
And speaking of resistance, I mean, let's talk about Iran for a moment as well. I mean, there's different layers here. For the moment, it seems that the president has said that the killing has stopped. I'm quoting here. I mean, countless thousands have died. We're still trying to get all the verified reports. But where is that headed? I mean, he also would meet more resistance there. We were talking about, will he intervene, will he not? It's still not fully clear. Where do you see this going? And what kind of a role did Gulf allies play in this? We're hearing a lot from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, trying to rein in the president. Did that happen, you think?
It's hard to say who he listens to on those matters. What's been consistent with Trump over time is he has always seen Iran as, the enemy consistently. North Korea, he'll, have hugs and kisses with Kim Jong-un, but, Russia, he shifts back and forth. Iran, he has been consistently, they are the enemy and, somebody who will confront. So he seems sincere and consistent in that respect. If he feels that he can, launch strikes and use, cruise missiles and those kind of assets, sure. Would he put troops on the ground? Again, that's a very different matter with a very different cost structure. Who knows how he's informed and what facts he's bringing to bear in his analysis, but I would expect that from a distance, yeah, he might intervene. Up close, I have more doubts that he would do that.
Because we're looking at this and we almost saw this moment. I mean, internet blackout, that's still going on right now. We're still not fully aware of all the loss of civilian life at the same time. But was this, again, a sort of brinkmanship? Was this a message to somebody else? How do we analyze his actions?
I guess, I wish I could say, but I don't have an honest portal into what he's thinking. I would imagine that he is being advised by lots of people and Gulf states and others, what is a good and bad idea. But as to what he brings to mind and who he listens to and what facts he has when he's making some of these unusual decisions or destructive decisions, it's hard to say.
But also I think what's clear as well is that there were some people quite unhappy. I mean, needless to say, the regime, of course, in Tehran, but other countries. Let's look at China, for instance. I mean, they've very much said strongly they're warning against any sort of interaction and intervention into Iran. Given all of the facts we have from the last few weeks already in this early new year, China's role in all this, are they becoming more of an appealing partner, perhaps to maybe the Europeans? I mean, it's very economic, but what is China's role in all this through Trump's actions?
Or Canada? I mean, none of this benefits the United States or our allies. Who does it benefit? Russia and China, right? To have internal dissension within NATO is great for Moscow from its point of view. For China, suddenly in the sort of competition economically and in terms of soft power around the world, suddenly the United States' greatest asset, the idea that, we're for, freedom, individual freedom, the propositions in the Declaration of Independence. The Chinese are in an autocratic, dictatorial surveillance state. You ought to come with us. Suddenly, Trump is, making us into an autocracy. When that's the choice, if you're Canada and you're being threatened with a Greenland-like incursion or invasion or something to make you the 51st state, they don't have to worry about China invading Canada. Suddenly have to worry about the United States doing so. So like countries like Canada are now pivoting from their largest trade partner right next door to China because it's a less dangerous strategic partner. So yeah, we've created uncertainty in our closest relationships, trade and security and otherwise, that benefit our enemies. So yeah, once again, it's kind of insane to do this, but here we are.
And also looking at one element which is key now is if we're looking at disinformation. Those campaigns have stepped up more and more. Looking also at what's happening in the mediascape, where do you see this going? I mean, Russia is behind a lot of this. How dangerous of this is another layer of more disinformation to affect public opinion? And all this?
Yeah, well, now that we have, artificial intelligence is growing exponentially month by month, and the ability to manipulate videos, so that makes it all worse. I mean, it all started with Russian disinformation, deployed against the UK and the US and probably Poland as well. But, our domestic forces have learned to do it themselves. We can now do it to ourselves without any reference to Russia or outside influence. So that whole process of reshaping reality, having people live in a bubble where 2 + 2 = 5, that's just built into the politics of every country now. Is it going to be worse? I think AI is going to make it even more challenging to keep ahead of it, but I also think that people are starting to realize that everything they see is not necessarily true. It creates some doubt, but when you get things so extreme, if the United States were to invade Greenland, if you have domestically, federal masked agents attacking US citizens, shooting them in the head unprovoked, I mean, that level of tyranny, it's hard to spin and disinform your way around it when you hear the shots outside your door, when your neighbor's taken away. So it's getting to the point where it's harder and harder to just spin and disinform your way out of it. If inflation and the economy are doing terrible, if he indicts the chair of our central bank and the dollar plummets and you have an economic crisis, people are going to notice they have an economic crisis. No amount of telling them they don't will convince them if they're actually experiencing it. So in that sense, once things become serious enough, I think disinformation has a harder time beating reality, but it's getting more and more sophisticated.
Yeah, so all kinds of layers of challenges ahead. It's just been a few weeks in the new year, but look, thanks so much for coming in, and really all your insights have been very, very interesting. Thank you
for having me.
So our guest here, Colin Woodard, thank you so much. And thank you for watching World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.